What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. It's Wednesday, so time to talk about the top trade targets for week 9. The trade deadline in the NFL has passed about 2.5 hours ago for me, so no more making speculative trades on what could happen there. I did want to start this video off first, though, by going over what happened at the trade deadline, just a few trades that will impact fantasy. Then we'll go over actual trading in fantasy. So, Hines traded to the Buffalo Bills for Zach Moss and a conditional 5th rounder that theoretically increases the upside for Moss, since he had no upside really given his situation in Buffalo. If there are multiple injuries for the Colts, I guess he could gain value, but I'm not really looking to him. It's more Deion Jackson now. Gains a good amount of value. Certainly not someone that we're going to be like starting every week right now, but he becomes one of those like premier handcuffs, like Rachaad White, Alexander Madison, Jalen Warren, etc. Like those running backs that if the starter went down, they're extremely valuable. That's what Deion Jackson is now. He was fantastic as the lead back earlier this season. And so like he should just be rostered. Like before, you weren't really rostering him when Hines and Fournette were both healthy. Now he should be rostered in all formats. But only so much upside while Taylor's healthy. You wouldn't actually be starting him then. For Hines, if you heard earlier in the day that he got traded, and you rostered him, you were probably hoping for a different destination. It's now a multi-running back committee for a pass catcher, right? So they have Singletary, but then they have both James Cook and Nyheim Hines as pass catching backs. No one really gets that many carries because not only do they throw it a ton, but then Josh Allen runs it a lot. None of them are going to get rushing touchdowns because they throw it for touchdowns. If they don't, Josh Allen runs it for touchdowns. So it's not a good spot, but technically he probably has a little bit more weekly value than he would for the Colts, just given that there was no carry upside besides Jonathan Taylor. He's got some now, but, not the landing spot you wanted for him. And it hurts the value of James Cook. Now he's not going to see that increased role. And it hurts Singletary because Singletary now, are they going to shift to using Hines on third downs? And now Singletary is only early down with no goal line and no receiving. It hurts definitely for all the running backs now in Buffalo. The Dolphins traded Chase Edmonds, a 2023 first and a 2024 4th round pick to the Broncos for Bradley Chubb and a 5th round pick. This makes the Dolphins defense stronger. If you're looking for streaming options, you see Miami, you see they haven't been phenomenal so far this season. It makes them much more viable as a streaming option. And then it gives Edmonds a tad more value because I suppose there's at least a chance that he goes in to Denver, he plays, he looks like their best back, he's getting targets. He had no upside in Miami now, he did to start the season, obviously, but he was just taken completely out of that role. He didn't fit the system that they had, and so it was very evident the last few weeks, you can't start, right? He's getting absolutely no volume on Miami. Going to Denver, it's a new chance for him, new possibilities. He only needs to beat out Melvin Gordon and Latavius Murray, or, just one of them really to get touches. So, good for him because he had no value before, but understand there's another spot where it's 3 running back committee, and this one's not on Buffalo. If you're going to be a 3 back committee, at least be on Buffalo, right? Because they're going to score a ton of touchdowns, they're going to be efficient. This is Denver. They're not scoring any touchdowns. They're not efficient. So a 3 running back committee there is not great. Speaking of the Dolphins, though, so they lose Edmonds, and so for 20 minutes, everyone's let's go. You've got Mostert now as the very clear lead back because you only have Ahmed and Myles Gaskin. But then they traded for Jeff Wilson. This is a really good landing spot for Wilson. It's not he becomes a slam dunk play in fantasy, and honestly, it's an unfortunate situation in fantasy. But just in terms of his value, you have them in previous weeks trading for McCaffrey. You've got Elijah Mitchell coming back. And so he had no value. He was not even going to see the field really in the upcoming weeks. And so it made sense. They trade him away. He goes to a team that's running, that same system, that same blocking scheme. And so he understands what to do there. That's why they traded for him. They didn't like what Edmonds was giving them, and so they trade him away. They bring in J.Wilson, who we know is going to be productive in this offense. A little bit unfortunate, though, because like Mostert was doing well. Mostert's a good running back, an explosive running back. I would expect in a few weeks, maybe like 3-4 weeks, we're like close to a 50-50 split. I would say Mostert has the edge because he's been there longer. He's been producing. And there's still a chance that J.Wilson comes in there, and he's just not as good. And it's more of like a 60-40 split. But I think that's what we should expect. Like 60-40, but approaching 50-50. And that wouldn't be fantastic because they are going to throw the ball a lot. They're not going to throw to the running backs all that much. And they're going to throw for a lot of touchdowns. And so if you're splitting 50-50, I can see a world where we're talking about Dolphins running backs every single week as, hey, you can play them. They're each going to get their like 9 to 11 carries. They're going to be relatively efficient, and you're just praying they score a touchdown. So not amazing, but if you were holding J.Wilson, this is a really good outcome for you because he's going to step right into a role. He's going to get touches. And if Mostert were to get hurt, then obviously, and vice versa, like both of them, if one gets hurt, then like the other one is going to be really valuable in fantasy. After that, we see the Claypool trade. He was traded to the Bears for a second round pick, pretty high for Claypool. This is another one where you definitely wanted a different landing spot. Like if you had Claypool, you saw he get traded, you're like, oh, nice. Like, did he go to the Packers? Did he go to, I don't know, like the Cowboys or something? No, he went to a team that's going to throw the ball 20 times a game. So you have Pittsburgh, obviously not an efficient passing attack, but they were still throwing the ball 37 times a game. Cut that by 17. Like, even if he has a 30% target share, which is a lot. That's a really high target share, especially since Mooney's on the team. Even if he had that, it's like 6 targets a game. He catches 3 to 4 of them. It's like he's unlikely to be someone we start. It's good for Fields. Like Fields has been phenomenal in fantasy recently. He's running for like 60 to 90 yards a game. If he keeps that up, and now he actually has a second talent to throw to besides, just the garbage that's been behind Darnell Mooney, maybe he can be more efficient through the air. Maybe they can, pace up this offense a little bit. I think they've run a lot of plays like the last 3 weeks. So trending up for Fields, but I would say for, Claypool, not amazing. But this is good for Deontay, who we're going to talk about later in this video, and Pickens, obviously, because both of these two see an increase in the target share. I don't know how much Deontay can really go up. He's already seeing a ton of targets, but especially for George Pickens, this is really, really good, especially for his long-term value. Next one is exciting. I think probably the most exciting, even though it might not seem like it on the surface, is the Hockenson trade. So Hockenson traded from the Lions to the Vikings it was Hockenson, 2023 fourth, a 2024 third for the Vikings, giving back a 2023 second and 2024 third round pick. Hockenson had been rumored to be like in trade conversations before this weekend. Then this weekend happens. You see Irv Smith go down, probably going to miss they said 8 to 10 weeks. So 2+ months. That's obviously not ideal. He's basically just you just cut him in fantasy, obviously. But that's like the rest of the regular season, right? And so it might take, a week or two for Hockenson to really get going. Usually when people get traded for, they don't step in that next week and all of a sudden just dominate, especially at the tight end position. But yeah, in a few weeks, I would expect him to be a full go. And I have him right now for an 18% target share. That makes him a tight end 5 rest of season. This is, again, a good landing spot because they don't spread the ball around. They're going to throw it to Jefferson, Thielen. They're going to throw it to the running backs a little bit. They actually don't throw to them all that much. But then just Osborne, Hockenson, nothing else. There's no ancillary targets. They don't have a fourth wide receiver. They don't really throw to backup tight ends. It's really just going to be those 4 and then maybe a little bit to the running backs. That's going to lock him in for a really good target share. We'll see how he's used in the red zone. This is a good thing for Hockenson, but it's also a great thing for basically all Lions players. I mean, they're going to use Brock Wright. They're going to use James Mitchell at tight end, but they're not as good as Hockenson. They're not going to command his target share. And so this just opens more targets up for everything. You kind of just see everyone get a small boost. But it's really good for Moner St. Brown because, Hockenson was just the other player like going in the middle of the field. Well, now that's all St. Brown. He should every single week get a little bit more healthy. Like, he's a wide receiver one rest of the season. It's a really good thing for him, but it's positive for everyone really on that team. Then the only other trade that we would need to go over, we already did, is Tony to the Chiefs. I went over that take on the Monday video, so if you haven't seen that, watch it. So that's the NFL trade deadline. How about fantasy trades? You probably can't trade for DJ Moore, Herbert, Alvin Kamara. Those are people we talked about recently. Kind of went off a lot. But among people we have talked about in recent weeks that I would still be buying low on, I would say it's Godwin, Jonathan Taylor, Moner St. Brown, DeAndre Swift, and Mark Andrews. Taylor, Swift, Andrews. That's all for the people who have like 0 to 2 losses. Like if you are, we've had 8 weeks. If you're like 3 and 5, you don't really want to trade for that group because they're more like long-term plays. I'm very confident to close the season. They're going to be good. And if you acquire them now, it's going to be good in the long run for you. But if you need to win right now, you're not trading for Mark Andrews, you're not trading for like Swift and Jonathan Taylor. Like, they're long-term plays, not right now. Taylor, Swift, they're working their way back from injury. We thought Swift was better, but a report came out today, actually, I guess yesterday for you guys, that he's not 100% right now. He's still working his way back. So for people who are like freaking out about his touches, that's why, they've said they're going to be very careful with him. And so every week we can kind of assume a little bit more of a workload, but it's probably not going to be until a little bit later in the season he's fully unleashed. It's good for teams who are, 6-2, 7-1. Target those teams. If you drafted Swift early, like, you're probably struggling a little bit because he hasn't played all that much. He's been good when he's been out there, but he hasn't played that much. And so if you're, ahead, or even if you're like 5-3, but you have a lot of points for, like, you think you're going to make playoffs, these are good players to target because obviously these are studs that have missed time in the regular season, have underperformed. I wouldn't say Andrews underperformed, but, he's, missed some time, been injured early in games. And so we look at that and it's like, if those teams are struggling, they need to win now. Well, Andrews is probably going to miss maybe 1 to 2 weeks with this injury. If you can acquire them for a lower cost than they're worth like long term, definitely be doing that. After that, I would say like the other two were Godwin and St. Brown. They're not longer term ads. They're definitely players you can just trade for right now and get that production. But Godwin in particular, I don't think St. Brown's getting unlucky, but I don't even know if Godwin's getting like unlucky or just the offense has been so bad. But I have to think, even if it's he's regressed after this injury for 1 year, because a lot of times post ACL tear, it takes like a year to get back, and the offense has been bad. So it's like those two things. But even with that, he's averaged 12 targets per game over the last 3 weeks, but yet he hasn't gone over 100 yards in those games, and he hasn't scored a touchdown yet on the season. His catch rate is below 64%. It was at 77% each of the last 2 years. Like, again, I know there are factors playing here where he's not going to be as good as he was in recent years, but he's been way worse than expected and way worse than expected given the volume he's receiving. I just can't imagine that he's going to stay at this low of a catch rate, that the offense will stay terrible all season, that he's just never going to score a touchdown. Like, these things are going to come. So I think he's a great buy low. And then, I talked about St. Brown. When we're looking at who benefits from this Hockenson trade, St. Brown benefits a ton. He's working his way back to health. He's going to be a focal point of this passing attack. Like, he's going off in, the future weeks. And so I definitely would acquire him. Aside from the list of names that we have talked about recently, 4 new names for you today: Cordero Patterson, Deontay Johnson, James Conner, and Jamar Chase. It's kind of funny because the first 3, I don't think anyone was expecting, because those are players that I wouldn't say I really hyped up this season. Definitely 3 players that were way below ADP in the ranking. So it's probably good we're talking about them in this video because many of you do not have these players right now, but they're players who underperformed to start the year, are at relatively low values, and, a common theme here, are probably on teams that are struggling to win games because these are, high-end players that are underperforming. Besides Chase, we'll talk about him last. It's like a different scenario. But like Patterson, he should be returning very soon. And when he does, I think he's going to be like a weekly running back too. I was like definitely wrong on him this season, but like given how awful this division is, and like even with Arthur Smith doing everything he can to just infuriate us every week, they're the division leaders at 4-4. Now, again, most divisions, that's not the division leader, but this has been a terrible division, and that means Patterson's going to remain relevant further into the season than I thought. I did not think they were going to win this division, and they still might not. But like, I didn't think they'd be this competitive. And so I thought to close the season, they'd be going to like Algier, right? That's what I thought would happen. But they're in it right now. And so when Patterson comes back, he's definitely better than like Huntley and Algier. And so he's going to get the ball a lot, especially, in the red zone. And so if he's going to be like a running back 2 rest of the season when he returns, I would definitely go after him right now. Then Deontay, obviously, we talked about it. Claypool leaving, that opens up value. But he's wide receiver 40 right now, behind Matt Collins, Mecole Hardman. Like, think about it like this. Deontay Johnson is 3rd among all wide receivers in targets. How on earth is he 40th in fantasy points? So I looked into it and I'm like, yeah, how did that even happen? I mean, it's really just like you start off with Trubisky, who's bad, and the offense just can't get going and has no aggression with that. Then you transition to a rookie quarterback who's better, like Kenny Pickett's better than Trubisky, but it's still a rookie, right? And you look at these games, they get the Jets, the Bills, the Bucks, the Dolphins, the Eagles. Like that's, a really difficult schedule. And 4 of those games are on the road. Like that's tough. Like they were in a really difficult spot. They've had really difficult matchups. So I guess it makes sense that they've been relatively inefficient. But I would expect like much better performances from Deontay post-bye. And it's likely, again, team drafted Deontay is struggling. One thing I'll say is that, like I kind of alluded to start, there's technically not a lot of room for his targets to go up. So, like, overall target share, like, again, he's 3rd in targets. So, I don't think he's all of a sudden leading the league in targets by a mile. So, he doesn't have as much room to go up as far as that's concerned. It's really just every week targets are locked in. And now that they've already had all these super difficult matchups, it opens up a little bit more of a season. If you wanted to trade for Pickett as like a lower end option, I'd be totally fine with that because his targets have more room to go up. So like I would expect more of Claypool's targets to go to Pickens than I would Deontay. But even if Deontay gains like 1 target a game, like he's a target hog. I mean, he's getting 1 million targets. Eventually he's going to score touchdowns. He's not going to get super unlucky. And when that happens, again, like I always say, you're not going to be able to trade for him. Then James Conner, I would just say that like Benjamin, Keontae Ingram, like no one has stepped up in James Conner's absence. And while Conner will never be someone you feel fully confident in starting every week, like he's still going to be someone who has all of that goal line role on lock. He'll get a few targets. So he's not going to be a weekly must start. But when they get everyone healthy, like especially when Marquise Brown is back and they have like Marquise Brown, they've got Rondale Moore, Hopkins, James Conner, they're going to be a better offense. So I think this is, again, another like longer term play. I think maybe in that last like month to month and a half of the season, James Conner might be scoring, like be back to being that like touchdown every week, getting like 60 yards, someone you can stick in a running back to and be like, he's got a chance to score me multi-touchdowns that can win you a championship. I wouldn't go out of my way to get him because, again, he's not a player we've ever really targeted, but his value's got to be like pretty low right now. And if he comes back, he's scoring touchdowns, it's going to go way up. And so I think like if you can get him for like flex value, do it. Maybe a low-end running back too. Anything more than that, and I would definitely say no. Then the last one is again, one for everyone who's got like a really good record right now, feels confident in their team, wants a long-term play. Listen, Jamar Chase is going to miss anywhere from like probably 3 to 4, maybe 5 more weeks, but probably only like 3 to 4 more weeks. And that's a huge blow for teams that drafted him in like probably the middle of the first round are going to miss that production. There was a trade for Chase in my 16-team league that involved Chris Godwin, and I think it was a trade that was very smart for both teams. The team that traded for him was like top 3 in place. I don't remember exactly which one. Could have been first, but it was like top 3 in the standings. And they already had Josh Allen. They already had Justin Jefferson. So they're like building their super team, right? So they're fine being like, listen, if I lose a few weeks If I have a little bit less production, it's fine because I have a good record. I'm making playoffs. I want that long-term upside. Then the team that had Chase was in win now mode. Like they needed production now. And so it was Chase for Chris Godwin. And I think that just makes a lot of sense. So if there's a player, like obviously Jamar Chase is like the top player you do it for, but if there's someone like Mike Williams, like Marquise Brown, that you are comfortable with your record, you want to offer something that like when that player is back, it is definitely like buying low. Like you don't want to offer someone of similar value because then what's the point of doing that? Like you are going to be rostering someone who's not playing right now. But if you can give like a lower end option for someone like Chase, Mike Williams, Marquise Brown, you're going to benefit in the long run. And if you think you're making playoffs anyways, why would you not benefit in the long run? So that's a quick breakdown of what happened in NFL trade deadline and my favorite players to trade for this week. There are more players to trade for on my website. You can also use the rest of season rankings. You can use the trade calculator as well to find more trades. I'll be back tomorrow to go over running back starts and sits. Friday, wide receiver starts, sits. Saturday, to go over my favorite plays this week. That, my friends, is in this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.